Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hi, I'm Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation.
3, 2, 1.
7 miles per second. That's what it takes for a spacecraft to break out of Earth's orbit. Breaking free of the gravity of Earth and heading into space, it's called escape velocity. It's easily one of the biggest challenges of space travel. The spacecraft needs an enormous amount of fuel to break free of Earth's gravity. The more fuel you have, the more thrust you achieve, but the fuel also adds to the weight of the rocket. It's almost maddening, and it's a catch-22 situation that scientists have been trying to solve for so long. And it drives us crazy when we look around us and we see people who are clearly more talented than us. We had this problem when we were in school. Some kids were brilliant at writing. Some were outstanding in maths. And as we grew up, we noticed people who sang better, danced better, they're better artists, better speakers, they pick up languages faster, and then we brush it off. We believe that we were born with certain skills, and it's best to use them to our fullest capacity. The gravity of our situation holds us back. But that's not how scientists look at gravity. For them, gravity is a challenge. Achieving escape velocity, that's simply a matter of breaking through what holds us back. It's always about how to go at 7 miles per second in the most efficient manner possible. What you're about to hear is my battle with talent. You may already know some of my skills: writing, drawing, teaching, painting, cooking. And that's what you've seen. You may not know that I'm also an excellent babysitter, I dance exceedingly well, I learn programs, and I know as many as 6 languages. I actually know a little more, but let's not boast. So that's why I'm telling you this stuff. I'm not trying to impress you. In fact, I started out studying the science of acquiring talent back in the year 2008. I'd be sitting in a cafe, someone would walk up to me and tell me how talented I was at drawing. Or I'd be on the dance floor and someone would compliment me about how well I danced. Now, compliments are amazing. They spurred me on to get a lot better, but they also drove me crazy. It almost seemed like people were suggesting that I was born with this skill. And so I started on an uphill climb. I wanted to prove that innate talent may not exist. In reality, I don't care whether it exists or not. But it wasn't easy to say it aloud because the very concept of acquiring talent seems improbable. Not everyone can be Michael Phelps, they tell me. Not everyone can be Albert Einstein. The funny thing is, I love pushback. I love it that people kept putting objections in my way because now I had to prove beyond any doubt that talent could be acquired. What made the challenge even more interesting was the concept of 10,000 hours. I was determined to prove that you didn't have to do 10,000 hours. You could acquire a skill in a lot fewer hours than that. But you don't have to believe me. Well, not right away. All I'm asking you to do is to listen to these 3 definitions of talent. And then I'll have made a little dent in your universe. Or at least that's the theory. So let's get down to this nitty-gritty of talent and see why just these 3 definitions can make you see the world the way I see it. So what are the 3 definitions? Definition number 1 is that talent is a reduction of errors. Definition number 2 is that it's a pattern recognition system at high speed. And definition number 3 is that talent is only something that you can't do. Now, this is going to be a long episode, so we're going to break it up into 2 parts. And in the first part, we'll cover the reduction of errors and that it's done at high speed. And then we'll go to the third part in the next episode. Let's start off with the first point, which is talent is a reduction of errors. This is my favorite definition. What does it mean that talent is a reduction of errors? No matter where you look, you find people who have talents in one area or another, except one. So this one area, you're not going to find anyone who's innately talented. Not one person is talented when it comes to riding a bicycle. When you see parents trying to teach kids to ride, they are unable to teach them to ride. They just run wildly behind the kid, they shout out instructions, and of course the kid can't hear anything. After all, that kid is desperately trying to pedal, is desperately trying to steer, is desperately trying not to go into the tree. So no one teaches you to ride a bike, and no one, at least no one I know, was born with the ability to ride a bicycle. Assuming you can ride a bicycle, that leaves us with only one conclusion. Bike riding has X number of errors that you can make, errors that involve steering, pedaling, balancing, etc. And slowly but surely, you started eliminating those errors one by one. The more errors you reduced, the less you crashed into trees. Eventually, as you ironed out most of those mistakes, you were able to sail away down the road and you went around chattering with your friends. Talent is a reduction of errors. When you begin to learn a new skill, you make an enormous number of errors. You've watched a student driver, haven't you? They're learning to drive a stick shift, a manual car, and they lurch back and forth trying to master the skill. But the brain has no reference point to those errors, so it's unable to cope, it's unable to do anything and finds the learning extremely tedious. Now, if you were to ask someone how to learn to drive a car or a bicycle, they would say to you the usual stuff, and they would say, practice, practice, practice. Yes, practice, but practice is not the answer. Even deliberate practice is not the answer. Instead, what's needed is an understanding of errors. When the brain consciously or subconsciously knows what errors it's making, it takes corrective action. Take, for example, the act of dealing with a hot pan. There's only one kind of error that's possible with a hot pan. And yet a 2-year-old child may not recognize that glaring error and then head straight for the pan. But once we're aware of the mistake, we take scrupulous care to avoid hot pans. We also avoid stepping in dog poo, potholes, and closed doors. The trick to learning or talent isn't just in practice or deliberate practice. Instead, it's about understanding errors. Once you understand the errors, you are closer to fixing them. Once you've reduced or eliminated the errors, you're effectively talented. An excellent example of error fixing is the website building software called Dreamweaver. If you open Dreamweaver today, you'd find the option of viewing a website into different views, different modes. So you can see the HTML on the left, and then you can see your website, which is the graphical view of your website, on the right. Even if you're completely oblivious about HTML, all you need to do is to open up a perfectly good looking website in Dreamweaver. Then you head into the left-hand side, which is the HTML. and tweak the text, make some changes. And immediately you see the change reflected on the right-hand side. And immediately you know that's an error. So you've got better because you made that error, your brain recognized the error, and then it fixed it. So you've learned from your mistake. Many of us believe that talent is either inborn or is acquired by practice. Instead, it's acquired by a reduction of errors. Everything you do today had a huge error rate at one point in time. Addition, subtraction, spelling, grammar, they were all riddled with errors. When you see people making mistakes as adults, spelling mistakes, basic grammar mistakes, it's not because they don't know how to write, it's because they've never learned that error, they've never learned how to fix that error. So they don't see the error, and if you don't see the error, you can't fix it. And that's why you have all of these grammar problems online. You can't fix a mistake unless you know you're making one in the first place. Take, for instance, my niece Marcia. When Marcia was just 3 years old, she came to visit us in New Zealand for the first time. At that time, her speech was a little garbled, like 3-year-olds. Even so, one of the letters that foxed her was the letter R. Whenever R was prominent, she substituted with Y. So road became yod, and room became yum. And of course, we only ever yoled in the gas, and that's rolled in the grass. If you tried to point out that she was pronouncing R as Y, she would look at you like you were a banana. In her brain, R sounded like Y. Then one day, I decided to speak exactly like her. I didn't say road, I said yod. I didn't say grass, I said gas. Marcia didn't say anything. Or if she did, she probably said it in her garbled voice and I didn't understand what she said. But within 2 days, she was pronouncing the R perfectly. Her brain, it seems, was able to detect the error when the word was said incorrectly. And within days and without any training, she was able to fix the problem. That isn't to say that all learning is made through trial and error. The brain is a pattern recognition system, and it will learn efficiently enough by just copying patterns. It's why we learn to speak a language. It's why we adopt the accent of our parents and then we change our accents when we go to school. A good chunk of learning is purely pattern recognition. What holds us back from learning a skill like dancing or cooking or drawing isn't pattern recognition, but knowing what we're doing wrong. There's a video online, it's called Austin's Butterfly. It shows a group of very young children appraising the work of one of their classmates, Austin. Austin is probably in the first grade, he's just drawn a butterfly, and there's only one problem. That tiger swallowtail butterfly, it looks amateurish, and the kids know it. At that tender age, they're not about to let Austin get away with such terrible work. Then something quite unusual happens. The teacher takes over and asks the kids to give feedback. One by one, they pipe up with their critiques so that Austin can take a crack at the second draft. They point out to the angles, the wings. They ask him to make the wings of the butterfly more pointy. And they go on and on and on, and the illustration improves with every draft. 6 drafts later, the butterfly looks like something like in a science book. The finished butterfly is so stunning that anyone, you, me, anyone would be proud to call that illustration our own. What's at work is simply a reduction of errors. This episode isn't about becoming Michael Phelps. It isn't about becoming Muhammad Ali. We're all tempted to diverge into why we're not winning gold medals by the dozen at the Olympics. If it's all so easy, why aren't we all winners? And yet, even at that Olympic level, there's only one person that wins the gold medal. Why is this so? Because in the Olympic stadium, let's go to the Olympic pool for instance, Phelps is often only 1/100th of a second faster than his rival. That's hardly an advantage. The only difference is that Phelps is committing fewer errors. And just for the record, Phelps too was beaten by a much shorter, stockier swimmer from Singapore. On one particular day, in one particular race at the Rio Olympics, Joseph Schooling made fewer errors, and he won the gold. Talent is merely a reduction of errors. When you reduce the errors, you get talented. But that's only the first definition. What about those that seem innately talented? They do things that we could never hope to do. In the next section, we look at the second definition of talent, where talent is about pattern recognition. It's about pattern recognition at high speed. What is 11 times 13? The answer is 143. What is 11 times 27? The answer is 297. Just for good measure, what is 11 times 45? If you said 495 in a flash, yep, you've got the right answer. However, the chances are that you're slightly flummoxed by the questions. You could clearly see that we were dealing with 11 times table, but it made no sense whatsoever when you had to multiply these random 2-digit numbers with 11. And yet, a 10-year-old could do it quite quickly. And I know this to be true because I teach willing 10-year-olds this simple maths trick. Let's start at the top, shall we? Let's look at the numbers. What's 27? 27 is 2 and 7. So we take that 2 plus 7, or we make it 2 plus 7, and we get 9. Now we take that 9 and we stick it in the center. So we had 2 and 7, and we got 9, so that's 297. So what number do you get? 297. What is 11 by 27? 297. You confused? Well, my brain took a little time to work out this system as well. So let's take a simpler example where you already know the answer. What is 11 times 12? You know the answer, right? It's 132. So what did we do? We took the 1 and the 2, which comes from 12, and we added it up. We got 3. We stuck the 3 in the middle, and we got 132. So what's 11 times 44? 4 plus 4 is 8. So stick the 8 in the center, put the 4s at the far ends like bookends, and you get 484. 11 times 44 is 484. What is 11 times 33? Yeah. 3 plus 3 is 6, so it's 363. Once you have this pattern, you can pretty much multiply any 2-digit number by 11 and get an answer in seconds. And what you've done is acquired a talent. Now, it's a very small talent, but it's a talent nonetheless. And the way we've gone about this whole thing is to isolate the pattern, roll it out slowly, and then you have the ability. At this point, your brain can figure out the pattern no matter what 2-digit number you multiply by 11. And you can get the answer right. A similar concept applies to just about any skill. Take drawing, for example. Many, if not most of us, say that we draw like 6-year-olds. And you know what? You're right. You draw like a 6-year-old because you stopped drawing when you were 6. You can walk into any school on the planet and you'll find the kids love drawing. Give them a set of crayons, give them chalk, give them even a piece of coal, and they'll be drawing endlessly. But ask them to do maths or grammar, and they look at you weirdly. However, Over time, that kid gets a packed lunch and is sent off to school, and the years whiz by, and suddenly those kids are 10 years old. Now, ask them about grammar, ask them about multiplication tables, and they give you pretty solid answers. But ask them to draw and notice what happens. They draw like 6-year-olds. Talent is about pattern recognition. Those kids were given patterns that involved algebra and grammar, so they picked up on those patterns. Music, arts, clay modeling, all the stuff that they did right at the start. That's for babies, isn't it? And this is how we go about life. We learn or are given patterns, and then we dump the others. Or at least we put them in cold storage. Some patterns are crucial, so we keep refining them. Take eating with a spoon, for instance. When you were 1 year old, trying to get a spoonful of mashed potato from the plate to your mouth, that was a major issue. Given a chance to do your own thing, the potato mash would be partly on your face, on the ground, on the dining table, everywhere. It would look like a potato war zone. But now you're able to use a fork, you're able to use a knife, you're able to conduct a conversation while trying to look up Facebook on your phone. And you do all of this at the same time. Somewhere along the way, pattern recognition kicked in. What seems like a mundane task of eating a potato was once horribly complicated. But given enough time, given enough pattern recognition, you're now a pro at potato eating. And that's all because this pattern recognition is costly in terms of energy. Think of it as a mansion with lights. When you're first learning something new, you have to turn on every light in the house. It takes enormous energy just to do the simplest task. Over time, your brain figures out the pattern. Instead of every light, it turns on half, then it turns on a quarter of the lights, and finally it needs that little torchlight, maybe, to do whatever task you're familiar with doing. Take, for example, the task of walking. You were hopeless when you started, right? But you don't think of it much now. You can do this walking bit very easily. So do this for me. Stand up and walk across the room and say left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. Balance, balance, balance. Think about walking. And you'll make it across the room, but your brain is using up so much energy that it instantly wants to stop all that chatter. And it does so because it's already worked out the pattern. It needs no power to get you to walk across a room. It requires no additional software to keep that walking going. It knows how to do it. It's worked out the pattern. All the skills you struggle with, they're a matter of pattern recognition. They're a matter of pattern execution. When you see someone that is giving an excellent presentation, you may wonder, how did they become such great speakers? And yet, you're not looking at their feet, are you? If you look at the feet of excellent speakers, they're not randomly moving around the stage. They're purposely moving in a triangular shape from one end to the other. When they get to one edge of the triangle, they stop. They scan the audience from one end to the other and make eye contact. So without saying a word, a speaker would have to learn how to walk, how to stop, how to make sweeping eye contact. These are all elements of pattern recognition. When you look at the speech, it's a series of items that include the graphics, the content, the slides, the structure of the presentation, stories, examples, and crowd control. So if you thought, I'll never be a great speaker, you're right. You're right because there are dozens of elements that the brain has to recognize and then implement. Just walking across the stage might take you a few weeks to master, let alone everything else. All of that pattern recognition has to be in place. It's only when that pattern recognition is in place that you can start to execute. But what about those who pick up patterns instantly? All of us, without exception, pick up patterns very quickly. We do have biases of picking up patterns. Some of us may find reading to be more fruitful than audio. Others may love audio. Some may prefer video and others just detest video. The picking up of a pattern relies strongly on the bias, but also the way the pattern is laid out. A good teacher can get a student to pick up the patterns a lot quicker than a mediocre teacher. Because a mediocre teacher just doles out information. Even so, some of us recognize patterns faster than others. I'll give you this example. There's this guy called Stephen Wiltshire. He is a master of instant pattern recognition. He's an autistic British architectural artist, and he's gained fame because he's able to draw an entire city after just looking at it once. In video after video on YouTube, Stephen draws New York, Rome, London, Singapore, and this is just after a single helicopter ride. His work is so precise that he matches every window, pillar, and doorway. And this is the kind of pattern recognition that most of us refer to when we're talking about talent. We feel that we can't just waltz into a room, pick up any violin, and play complex music. We feel only talented people can do this. Yet, there's a downside to being able to do very complex activities almost instantly. Wiltshire, for instance, struggles with everyday activities. He struggles with boarding a train. He struggles with having a long conversation with people. The reality is that we average people, we can achieve a lot of talents in various fields. We might consider ourselves to be pretty average, but with the right teacher, with the right methods, and with the right group, you and I, we can achieve extraordinary limits of talent and in diverse fields. We don't get this instant ability, of course, but we can achieve all those talents, and we can still do our everyday activities with ease. The moment the talent or skill is broken up into isolated pockets of learning, we can quickly pick it up. We can become exceedingly good at that skill. So talent is just pattern recognition. It's just pattern execution at high speed. You know a Picasso is a Picasso because Picasso had a style. And what is style? Yeah, it's just science sped up. Picasso may not have been able to explain how his brush work ended up as a piece of art, but the very fact that we recognize it means he had a system, he had a style, and it was all his own. For a forger to replicate a Picasso, all he needs is the blueprint of the pattern. And we might end up buying a very expensive piece of junk because of the replication of that pattern. It's very easy to believe that all talent is inborn, yet almost everything we do today is learned behavior. Our languages, the ability to write, to speak, to walk, to dance, to cook, they're all a style, they're a pattern. And while there's no doubt that there is something, some hardware that we're born with, the vast majority of what we can do is all learned through pattern recognition and execution. And this brings us back to 11 by 22. 11 times 22. Do you know what the answer to that is? It's 242. It wasn't as hard as the first time, was it? But what about 11 by 29? Now your brain has to light up and figure out a separate pattern. You have to carry that digit over because 29 is 11, so that's 2 digits, not 1 digit. So it adds up, and you have to see this on paper because it's complicated in audio. But the answer is 319. So 2 becomes 3 and it's 319. And finally, 1, last one, which is what is 11 times 99? You'll have to remember that by heart. It's 1089, 1089. See? It's a pattern. Find a great teacher who has a great system, who has a great group that's working together, and you will magically become talented. No doubt practice will be involved, but it's far less practice than you'd imagine. And the results will be superior to just plodding around on your own. So we've finished 2 definitions of talent. Talent is a reduction of errors. Talent is a pattern recognition system. In the next episode, we will look at something that will stop you in your tracks. It's looking at talent from a way that you probably never imagined in your life, about how talent is just something that you can't do. But let's wrap up this episode and let's go to a summary. So what did we cover in this episode? What we covered were 2 things. The first thing was that talent is a reduction of errors. The problem is that we don't know what the errors are. Once we know what the errors are, we're able to see them, we're able to reduce them, and we become talented. We see this on several of our courses, whether you look at copywriting, whether you look at article writing, you look at any of the skills, and they're very diverse skills. They're not even slightly connected with each other. And yet when you look at them, what all the clients are doing, all the people in the course are doing, is they're given a task to do, but they're not just given the how-to, but they're given how not to. So in many of our courses, what we do is we make them do the how-to, but then we get them how not to. So how to write a headline, but then there is a mistake-making week where you break the headline. And so you recognize the pattern. You recognize when you're writing a bad headline by writing a bad headline, but knowing what the good headline is. And it's very hard to write bad headlines after that. So a lot of training that you see around you is all about how to. And how to is not enough, because how to doesn't teach you what the mistakes are. Everyone tells you should learn from your mistakes. Well, what are the mistakes? It's not like you go to school and they have a mistake-making session, is it? So you've got to work out the mistakes, and a good teacher does that. A good teacher will make you make the mistakes, will point out the mistakes, will set you through a mistake-making opportunity. And then you fix your mistakes and you reduce the errors and you become talented. It takes time, but it doesn't take as much time as what you'd read in a book. You'd read that you have to do deliberate practice and you have to have thousands of hours and 10,000 hours and whatever hours. You don't have to do that. You have to know the mistakes. If you know the mistakes, you can do that in a fraction of the time. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it is pattern recognition. Everything that you see, when you see an artist painting, what they have worked out is a bunch of patterns, and then they run it at high speed, and then it looks like art to you. When you look at a programmer programming at high speed, it was just a bunch of patterns. They had small patterns, which became bigger patterns, which became more complex patterns, and then they roll it out, and it looks like, wow, this person was born to code, but it's not true. What also plays a big role is how that person was taught. So all of us have different methods of learning, and if you're taught in a way that allows you to learn quickly, then you have that pattern in your head. And most of us have this stuff. We have this ability, but then we're put into a situation where it's one size fits all, and we have to work around that. And in trying to work around, say, what we learned in school, well, that takes up so much energy. We're frustrated. We don't like to learn that subject. We don't like maths. We don't like English. We don't like that. And the reason why we don't like it is because we are not given the pattern that we like. Once we get that pattern, it's simple. It's like Dreamweaver. Left-hand side, right-hand side, you can see the changes you're making. You can see where you're breaking it. You can see where you're making it. It's not that hard. So that's what we've covered today, and that brings us to the end of the episode, and we go straight into Psychotactics land. What's happening in Psychotactics land? One of my clients, she came in from Australia last week, and Australia is just 3 hours away from New Zealand. She went just 4 or 5 days to the South Island, and she was amazed at New Zealand. It was like, wow, why haven't we come to New Zealand before? Even though it's a great place to live, and I'm not making fun of Australia here, you know that, don't you? But even though it's a great place to be, wherever you are, with whatever talents you have, there is so much more that you can achieve. And she came here and she was amazed at what she learned and what she saw and what she experienced. And you think, well, 3 hours away, how much could change? It's probably the same thing. It's not. And I would ask you to make that trip, make that jump as well. We've got a workshop, and notice how quickly I slid into that workshop bit. We've got a workshop in New Zealand. So if you've never visited New Zealand, go to psychotactics.com/X2017. There's a workshop on how to create your landing page. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's on the 14th, 15th, and 17th of February. So come to New Zealand and enjoy the beauty, even if you're just next door in Australia. What else is happening? The first 50 words course, that's going to happen in March. That's going to roll out in March. But right now we have the sales page. It's up. Yes, it's up. So go to psychotactics.com/X50 and you can read all about the first 50 words. It's about how to start up your article, how to start up your webinar, how to start up your podcast, how to start up your presentation. And it's about pattern recognition. There are patterns that you can follow and get very good at it. And of course, I will take you through the course and I will make you crash your current pattern and then rebuild it, and then you become very good. What this means is that you don't have to spend hours trying to figure out, how am I going to start this article? How am I going to do this stuff? So that's the first 50 words course. It's coming up. Go to psychotactics.com/X50 and you'll find out that for yourself. There is still 5000 BC if you just want to join a community of introverts. This is a really nice place to be, and we put in some really cool features in 5000 BC. What we really look at in 5000 BC isn't more information. I mean, we have lots of information. Now, I put out tons of information, and frankly, it's hard to cope with just the volume of information that's out there, let alone more information. But what's useful to you is, what am I going to do with that information? How am I going to roll it out? You may not think that 5000 BC is any different from any other website, but when you go there, you'll find out for yourself. You'll find out that I'm there 25 times a day, that the community is unlike anything that you've ever seen before. Our motto is be kind, be helpful, or be gone. Go there, check it out at 5000bc.com, get on the waiting list. You still have to wait 21 days, and that's your ticket to meeting this whole bunch of introverts that really help you move along instead of just running around in circles. That's me from Psychotactics Land saying bye for now. Bye-bye.